Before we begin this podcast, please be advised that the following episode contains language that some listeners may find offensive and inappropriate. The opinions expressed by the host and guests are their own and do not reflect the views of the podcast producers. Listener discretion is advised.
On this week's episode of Voices of a Killer, we're talking to Ray Johnson, the man convicted of a 2016 murder outside a gritty Kansas City bar. After he was seen fleeing the crime scene, Ray was held responsible for Derek Wren's death by a 12-man jury. However, from taking the stand to our interview today, Ray has avidly maintained his innocence and fought for his conviction to be overturned. Now we listen to Ray's side of the story, a narrative that's often gone unheard. We dig into the notoriety of Bob's In Motion Bar, interrogate the evidence that convicted Ray, and question whether the right man is paying for this crime. Did Ray Johnson kill a stranger in an open street in cold blood? Or is he a tragic victim of a broken criminal justice system? Stay tuned as we seek answers from the one man who can give them on this episode of Voices of a Killer.
So, Ray, I actually have your appeal right in front of me, and I'm reading a lot of stuff. I know you told me that you pled not guilty. In your appeal, there's quite a bit of stuff like witnesses, which is really difficult for a defendant when there's witnesses that basically say, yeah, that's the guy.
There's nobody that said that on mine. Witnesses, there's one person that just said that he never said I did anything. He described someone while he was driving down the street. Now, the witnesses that should have been called described someone else. They described the person who did the thing that I told my lawyer that she should have called, that she didn't call. That's what you're saying in the appeal.
So in the casework, to me, the verbiage is saying that the victim is trying to point you out, or at least that's what they're trying to write. So in other words, in court, did you have somebody take the stand and point you out?
Nobody never pointed me out. Nobody ever even picked me out. The witness got on the stand. He didn't even say I did nothing. Yeah. So
then I'm going to probably back off a little bit on my assumption of the case. To me, and of course, you know, Ray, I'm not an attorney, but whenever I read it, I was like, wow, it looks like there's a witness that's basically pointing him out. But since you didn't have a witness at trial point you out at the stand, it's a little bit better than I thought. So what I want to do, Ray, is tell me, you're in prison right now for murder, and obviously you're claiming that you didn't do this. Take me back to your younger days I want to try to figure out, connect the dots on why you wind up where you are now. What was life like when you were younger?
Well, when I was young, my mother, she kind of bounced around, so I stayed with my grandmother. My grandmother was a sweetheart, and she kept me most of my younger years until I was 15, and she passed away. I didn't have no problems in life. I wasn't, no bad kid or nothing like that. Actually, I did everything.
Yeah, how old are you now?
45.
45. I'm actually going to turn 45 here in a month or so, so we're very close in age. So you grew up as a kid in the early 90s. Did you see any kind of violence, or did you have a father figure in your life, or what?
Yeah, so actually my father just got off the phone with my father. My father was in my life. He made sure that I was cool, but then I did grow up in the inner city, so the inner city is keen to violence on a regular. So, did you get into doing any kind of crimes and stuff as an adolescent? Actually, I did not. I went to school. I was a part of ROTC. Like I said before, I went to school all my years.
Did you get to graduate from high school?
Actually, I did not, though. I got to my 11th grade year, and I got kicked out of school for having a fight.
Oh, you were so close.
I went and got my GED after that.
Okay. So you ended up finishing, but you got kicked out of 11th grade. So what kind of student were you? Did you make good grades? Were you a decent student?
So. I'm not going to say I was the best. I did enough to get by.
Born and raised in a rough, inner city neighborhood, Ray was surrounded by drugs and violence from an early age. In spite of this, he was a decent kid who kept his nose out of trouble. Perhaps that was largely thanks to his grandmother's influence. A kind lady, Ray's grandmother took on the mantle of Ray's primary caregiver and imbued his life with the stability he needed. From what we can tell, a young Ray was a responsible student who never skipped school, enrolled in junior military training, and with some perseverance, returned to complete his high school diploma as an adult. For a large chunk of his life, Ray resisted the pressure to take part in the criminal activity he had been exposed to. Only later on in life did Ray strike up a criminal record of his own. Whether out of financial desperation or a simple urge to fit in, Ray began selling drugs around his community, effectively trading his clean-cut image for a darker one. After the break, we hear more about Ray's struggle to stay on the straight and narrow.
So did you ever get into selling drugs or anything?
Actually, as I got older, after my grandmother passed away, I kind of went down that route of selling drugs, and I ended up in the federal penitentiary. My first time ever being locked in a cell. But I was 33 years old, but I ended up going to the federal penitentiary.
You know, Ray, you kind of seem well-spoken. I would suspect that somebody that, I know there's some groups in society that turn to selling drugs because it's a lot more difficult for them to kind of fit into places that, you know, are regular jobs and things like that because of whatever reason. But you don't seem to be that person. Why would you turn to doing that?
Well, it kind of was, I want to say, core belief thing. Just in my neighborhood, it's everybody around me, it was just, that's what it was. And this was like second nature to me as I grew up, basically, I guess.
Okay. So how much time did you do in feds?
64 months.
Do you feel like that just made you to where you were more of a criminal when you got out and you kind of, that was a notch in your belt?
Actually, when I got out of the federal penitentiary, I went and got my CDLs. I was applying for my LLC, starting me a corporation. I was getting my credit together. I was kind of doing what I was supposed to do to start a life as a grown man. And
how old were you when you got out of the feds?
37.
So you were deciding then to kind of just straighten it out?
Yeah.
So the week or two before this crime happened, if I were to ask somebody, what's Ray like? What would they have said? Somebody that knows you.
I'm an outgoing, fun-spirited person. I like to be around people and bring people together.
So you're 37, you get your CDL and you start doing the right thing. Are you doing any kind of stuff on the side, like selling drugs and stuff?
No, I was just, I was going to that bar. This case that I'm on now happened 6 months after I left the federal penitentiary. And
I read about this bar, and it actually closed down, I think, because there's too much heat going on there. What's the name of the bar again in Kansas City?
Bob's in Motion.
Yeah, kind of a strange name. You said you were a regular there. Did you go there before the feds, or just after the feds you became a regular?
No, before the feds. Actually, the owners are my auntie's friends. So as a youngster, my auntie and them was bartending there, and I used to go, they own 2 clubs, so I kind of back and forth with both.
Troost Avenue is a long road with a checkered history that slices Kansas City in two. Historically used as a racial division line, Troost Avenue is still a symbol of social discord and segregation in the city today. It was also on this avenue that the notorious Bob's and Motion operated for 30-odd years. Over the years, Bob's stirred up a reputation as a public menace. Nearby residents complained about the unruly crowds that frequented the bar, playing loud music, littering the streets, and breaking into fights at late hours of the night. Apart from these public disturbances, violence regularly broke out around the vicinity of Bob's, with 15 people shot or assaulted and at least 2 killed since 2008. As a result of public outcry, law enforcement faced mounting pressure to shut Bob's down. After years of temporary suspensions and community meetings, Bob's liquor license was finally revoked, and by 2023, Bob's Bar was no more. One incident that tarnished Bob's reputation irreparably was the 2016 killing of 42-year-old Derek Wren. Look up the court documents online, and you'll read a case summary that goes something like this. On April 23rd, Derek Wren exited Bob's and Motion, followed closely by Ray Johnson and 2 of his friends. Outside, a fight ensued, after which Ray shot Derek dead and fled. Laying out the facts like this might sound damning, but is there more to this story than meets the eye? On the next episode of Voices of a Killer, Ray shares never-heard-before details that shake up this case. If you want to find out what happens next, right now, you can sign up at patreon.com/voicesofakiller. There you can find bonus content, early access, ad-free listening, and access to our chat community. So go to patreon.com/voicesofakiller to sign up now. Your support is what keeps us passionate about bringing these stories to you. That's a wrap on this episode of Voices of a Killer. A big shout out to Sonic Futures, who handled the production, audio editing, music licensing, and promotion of this podcast. If you want to hear more episodes like this one, make sure to visit our website at voicesofakiller.com. There you can find previous episodes, transcripts, and additional information about the podcast. Lastly, if you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving us a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Your feedback helps us improve and reach new listeners. Thank you for your support, and we can't wait to share more stories with you in the future. Thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Toby, and we'll see you next time on Voices of a Killer.